Always Mine by SamadiW. Chapter 4. 2 weeks before the ball, Ginny cornered Hermione after arithmetic class with a crazy look and her usually neat red hair in disarray. Hermione held her books up in defense and asked cautiously, "What's up, Gin?" Ginny had a wild look in her eyes and her whole demeanor was terrifying. She stepped closer to Hermione and squealed excitedly, "Shopping!" A few students standing close to him jumped and eyed them in suspicion. "We need dresses for the ball," Ginny explained further, and Hermione visibly relaxed. Well, the redhead had her there, she thought. She desperately needed a nice new dress. Besides, she wanted to shake things up, step out of her comfort zone, and wear something sexy and daring. Her only female best friend was the perfect person to help her make this a reality. "Sure, Gin. This weekend, let's hop over to Hogsmeade," Hermione replied, excited at the prospect. Ginny linked her arm through hers and beamed. "My thoughts exactly." Hermione fell into a pattern around Draco. At least, he wasn't a complete prat. They usually ignored each other, or he stared at her intently enough to make her flee the room. Draco did, however, have a long line of women at his door, a new one practically every other day, and the only repeat was Astoria. It was near torture to endure these girls gushing and swooning over him like he was special. Just the other day he caught her looking and raised an eyebrow. Rolling her eyes, she showed him a disgusted, throwing-up face with elaborate actions. He laughed and continued to snog the living daylights out of Astoria. Grudgingly, they tolerated each other's existence. The weekend came fast, and the girls were glad. The demanding nature of their last year at Hogwarts took its toll on even the brightest witches and wizards. Homework and coursework had them up till late into the night. Even the meticulous head girl was exhausted. Draco grimaced, pushed her papers around, and asked in shock, "How can you study so much?" Hermione ignored him, her nose buried in books. She concentrated on the passage. Shaking his head in bewilderment at the creature Granger was, he exited the door. Ginny and Hermione walked along the streets of Hogsmeade hand in hand, admiring the many dresses on display. They entered their usual store, and Wendy greeted them cheerfully. "Heard about the balls, darling. We have some stunning new designs." The girls squealed in delight. Ginny was the first to find her dress after 3 tries. It was a light purple off-shoulder dress that flowed to the ground. Hermione gushed. "You look absolutely gorgeous. Harry's going to love it." Ginny made a face and grinned mischievously. "I have to love it before he does, and I really do." She quickly twirled and asked, "So, have you found yours?" Hermione shook her head in disappointment. "Not yet, but I'll keep looking." She didn't find the perfect dress at the store. They walked around and kept looking until she spotted it on a store dummy. It grabbed her fancy at once. Grabbing Ginny's hand, Hermione ran towards the store. It was a black and white short dress that stopped just above the knees, with an exquisite sleeveless, high neck halter and daring full-open back. The top was intricately done with black lace and looked classy and elegant and had a certain dangerous appeal to it. It was perfect. Hermione felt excited. She did a quick turn and came out to show Ginny. Her hands went to her face, and Ginny squealed, "Oh, wow, Hermione!" She added enthusiastically, "You look so sexy, you have to buy it." Hermione smiled and nodded in agreement. Satisfied with their purchases, they went over to get a bite to eat at the 3 Broomsticks. Ginny bit into her sandwich and asked curiously, "Come on, what's it like living with Malfoy?" "Exciting," came the smooth but amused reply from behind them. "Good afternoon, Granger. Girl weasel." Draco rode lazily, his eyes sparkling in the sun. He looked over their shoulders. Draco, Blaise, and Theo stood behind them, scanning the room for a table. Theo was carrying and balancing a lot of packages. In the blink of an eye, they crashed to the ground and littered the floor. "Bugger!" Theo cried as he bent to pick up the stuff. Nobody paid him much attention. Hermione stared at the southern trio and noticed how different the three men were. They were all handsome in their own right, but so different in looks. Of course, Draco was in a league of his own, but the other two boys had a certain charm and air about them. Blaise, with his hypnotic eyes, smooth skin, and tall, lean build, made him quite popular among the ladies. His dirty blonde hair and tall, lanky frame made Theo pleasing to look at, but his quick, razor-sharp intellect kept him interesting. He was the undisputed funny one of the group and could be counted on to diffuse a tense situation or create one with his witty and sarcastic jokes. Draco brushed Hermione's shoulder lightly with his fingers as they passed, and an involuntary shudder went down his spine. The boys walked away from the girls, settled into an empty table on the other side of the room, and ordered fire whiskey and butterbeer. The girls were having a good time, chatting and devouring delicious plates of fish and chips. Hermione and Ginny spoke about Harry, Ron, and Luna's new fascination with yet another make-believe magical creature, and looked back to study Blaise. He was good-looking. Parvati certainly had a good taste. Parvati confided that she recently developed feelings for Blaise after their shared transfiguration class. She said he seemed to reciprocate her feelings, but she couldn't be sure and asked her friends for help. Especially Hermione, since she spent a whole lot of time with Malfoy. Hermione loved spending time with Ginny, and the deeper they got into their conversation, they could hear the hearty laughter from the Slytherin boys. Theo made an impression that looked like Professor Flitwick. Draco laughed hard, and Blaise doubled over with laughter. Hermione stared at the blonde Slytherin with an amused expression. She hardly ever heard Malfoy laugh, and it tickled her senses. It was a nice and pleasing sound. Ginny finished her butterbeer, and they left. "Bye, girls." Theo's somewhat drunken voice trailed after them. Hermione glanced over her shoulder and caught Draco's eyes on her. His intensity threw her off, and she scurried away. Back inside the comfort of the dorm, she cuddled on the sofa and nursed a hot chocolate. She contemplated on what book she would read later. Hermione saw Draco enter, and without going straight to his room like he normally did, he sat down on the beanbag in front of her and closed his eyes. He thought this might be the best time to ask him about Blaise and mentally prepared herself. How would she go about breaching the topic? Hermione put aside her book and plucked up the courage to ask. She cleared her throat. Malfoy?" His eyes were still closed, but he muttered, Can I ask you something?" she asked rather timidly and out of character. His eyes flew open. He stretched his long legs and sat up a bit straighter. He took in her nervous state and frowned. "If it's not something annoying, yeah, sure, go ahead and ask." Draco watched her closely. Why the hell was she so anxious? Hermione crossed her legs, tied her hair up in a bun, and quizzed. "Does Blaise have a girlfriend? And, what kind of girls does he like?" "What the fuck? Did Granger just ask him about his sodding best friend?" He played it cool. "Why do you ask, Granger? Sick of weasel shit already?" Why was his chest tightening? What kind of magic was this? She hesitated and looked away. "No, it's for a friend." "Bullshit." Draco shot to his feet and hissed, "Do you have a fucking crush on my best friend?" Before she could respond, he stalked off with a final cruel, "Well, you're not his type." The absolute arrogance of Malfoy was staggering. Why was he so angry? Even if she did like Blaise, what the hell was it to him? Draco closed the door behind him and threw the book at the wall. His behavior disappointed him greatly. The day of the ball was upon them, and Hermione stood in front of the mirror. She wore very little makeup. It wasn't needed. She had clear skin minus the freckles and only chose natural colors to emphasize her cheekbones. Using a Muggle invention on her hair called straightening iron, she let her hair fall in short, straight waves around her face and down her back. The dress fit well around the neck. It hugged her figure, exposing the whole back. She stepped into high heels and did a final turn before heading out the door. She caught sight of her reflection and grinned. She looked good and felt bloody awesome. Draco stood in the middle of the common room, fixing a cufflink on his crisp black shirt. The material hugged his torso, emphasizing his newly gained muscles from vigorous Quidditch training. The cufflinks were a gift from his mother. Miniature versions of the Slytherin house symbol with an intricately carved white gold snake with emerald eyes. He wore it with all his dress shirts, but they were not cooperating tonight. Fast losing his patience with the stubborn cufflinks, he swore, "Fuck this!" The sound of high heels distracted him, and he looked up, annoyed. He did a double take and stared openly. Time stood still. Draco froze, transfixed and not daring to look away in case she disappeared. He knew he must have looked absolutely mental, just gawking at her like some love-struck fool, but he couldn't take his eyes off her. His grey orbs took in her curves, hair, smooth, creamy skin, and long legs. Salazar, she looked exquisite. He swallowed hard. His trousers felt uncomfortable, and he shifted his weight to allow some freedom. "Malfoy!" Hermione cried in alarm. His behavior was making her exceedingly nervous. Draco snapped back to attention and asked in a daze, "What did you say?" Hermione smoothed down her dress and frowned. "Why are you staring at me like that? Do I look bad?" she asked with a level of hesitancy. She was genuinely curious, but also partially afraid. He pursed his lips and then adopted a sneer. "Grow up, Granger. You look fine. At least for fugly Gryffindor." Shot back insultingly and tried his best to cover up the idiotic way he reacted. He saw her face fall slightly and hated himself for making such a crude comment. It was completely uncalled for. He breathed another look at her without her noticing. Granger looked beyond beautiful. Hermione bit back a nasty remark. He was such a fucking prat. A gorgeous prat, she had to admit grudgingly. He had gone with his signature all black ensemble. Seriously, how many ways could you wear the same color and look so unbelievably sexy every time? Apparently, Malfoy did. He looked absolutely sexalicious, if that was even a word, but what did it matter? He was a horrid human being. Hermione bit her lip unconsciously and let her eyes devour him whole. His husky voice was laced with wanting. "Granger, if you bite your lip like that while looking at me, I'm going to take you into my room and bend you over the table." The serious remark cut through her rather steamy thoughts. Blushing, she quickly turned to leave and wondered if there was any truth to his threat. As head boy and head girl, they had to be there early to make sure everything was done in their proper place. The prefects would have already gone to the Great Hall. Hermione was almost out of the door when Draco cursed aloud. She threw her head back and sighed. "Merlin, what now?" "Blast this tie!" He groaned and pulled the silk material from under his collar. Everything was determined to fuck up his life tonight. Hermione rolled her eyes and closed the distance between them. Draco studied the petite frame in front of him curiously. He mentally counted the number of freckles on her nose. They resembled tiny blobs of chocolate. She reached to touch the collar of his expensive shirt. He took a step back hesitantly and muttered, "What the hell are you doing, Granger?" "Just shut up and hold still." Hermione shot back, irritated and impatient. Draco watched closely as Hermione's fingers raised the collar and placed the tie in its rightful place. He had been so intently focused on her face, he hardly realized that he had bent for better access. Merlin, she smelled heavenly, slightly of lavender and roses. Face scrunched up in concentration, Hermione expertly tied the knot, brought it to the center, and tightened it before releasing him. Draco felt the Windsor knot under his fingers. It was perfect. She hadn't even used her wand, just her small fingers to work her own brand of magic. Their fingers brushed against each other, and they stepped back as a bolt of electricity shot through their bodies. She looked away first, breaking their intense eye contact, and he quickly mumbled, "Thank you." Hiding the smile that lit up her face, she left the room, leaving the door open for him to follow. Pretty Gryffindor in front and sexy Slytherin right behind her. He itched to steal a kiss against the cool stone wall of the castle, but thought it was a horrible idea. They heard a loud, excited chatter come from within the great hall. Students dressed in their finest made their way down the stairs and towards the festivities. The great hall looked amazing. Their theme, unity, had been a great idea. It had a profound meaning. The whole place was decorated using the house colors, and rows of food and beverages were arranged to the left. Draco and Hermione quickly looked around, satisfied they shared a warm and happy smile. Professor McGonagall had it their way and declared, "Everything looks wonderful. Good job, Miss Granger, Mr. Malfoy." Looked around and greeted a few students and said, "And before I forget, I think it would be prudent if the prefects and heads take to the dance floor first." The headmistress told them offhandedly while looking after hats at the professors who gathered near the entrance. "Oh, is that really necessary?" Hermione asked timidly. "Yeah, no problem, Professor." Draco replied quietly, looking away distracted. They answered at the same time, and McGonagall looked at them curiously. Turning to Hermione, she smiled and asked impatiently, "Thank you, Mr. Malfoy. I trust it won't be an issue, Miss Granger." "Of course not, Professor. No problem at all," Hermione replied, keeping her eyes fixed on Malfoy. He was certainly acting strange, and she couldn't figure out why. The eyes blonde had agreed way too easily. Were so unlike him that it was downright bloody unnerving. No snarky comment, and nothing. She tried to read his face, but it didn't reveal anything. He sat past her head, with his hands in his pockets, and grinned. Hermione felt a hard slap on her back, and she flinched in slight pain. "Damn, Granger, you clean up good," he declared with an admiring look and low whistle. "Save a dance for me," he requested boldly. Draco glared at Theo. Astoria snaked her hands around the fuming blonde and kissed him on the cheek. Hermione rolled her eyes at the Slytherin girl. She reeked of desperation, and it repulsed her. Taking the opportunity to approach Blaise, she went to stand by him, touched his arm, and requested politely, "If time permits, will you come by our table?" Blaise was clearly shocked, but very intrigued. Granger was an intelligent and pretty woman. He nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, of course, Granger. I will come by later." Hermione gave him a small, encouraging smile. Draco eyed the exchange frustratedly and gave her the death stare he was famous for. She shrugged, not knowing why he glared at her, and turned away. He almost stepped towards them when a small hand cupped his face and kissed him. Hermione stiffened and stared at Astoria Greengrass kissing Draco and clawing at him in front of everyone. She had seen them tongue wrestle before, but why was this time so different? Why did this play make her uncomfortable? She began to feel uncomfortable around all the Slytherins, and took the slurping noises as a cue to get out of there, so she searched for her friends. The minute Granger was out of earshot, Draco broke free from Astoria, pushed her away somewhat roughly, and rounded on Blaise. "What the fuck did Granger want?" Blaise threw him a funny look.
Steady on, mate. You just asked me to stop by the table later on.
He frowned and looked at the spirited head girl walking towards the Gryffindor table. What was she up to? Ron, Harry, Ginny, Neville, and Luna commandeered the table closest to the dance floor, and Hermione waved at them cheerfully. Ron hugged her tightly and ran his fingers down her bare back suggestively.
You look great,
he gushed, running hungry eyes over her bodies. She grimaced, took a step back, and scrunched up her nose. The stench of fire whiskey was strong on his breath. She took a step back and eyed her boyfriend disapprovingly. Locking eyes with Ginny, she asked, irritated, "Has he been drinking?" Ginny looked sternly at her brother.
Yeah, they started in the common room.
Harry glanced at Ron and frowned. His best friend needed good talking, too, since Ron's drinking habits of late were out of control. Hermione smacked her forehead and asked curiously, "The heads and prefects have to open the dance floor. Who do you fancy a dance with?" Ginny groaned, thought briefly, and replied thoughtfully,
I guess Michael's fine. At least he won't try to grab my ass. What about you?
However, Harry wasn't comfortable, since he knew Michael and Ginny had history, and her performance on the Quidditch pitch had ended the budding romance. Hermione felt her gaze shift to a Slytherins gathered near the beverage table. "Malfoy," she almost whispered like it was a sin. Ginny gasped.
Oh, bloody hell, no way! Is that why he's staring at you?
Staring at you? What in the world did Ginny mean? Perplexed, Hermione followed Ginny's gaze to find Draco glaring at her. She shuddered at the intensity in his penetrating grey eyes. What had she done to deserve that look? Ron's hand around her waist tightened, put her closer to him, and ran another finger down her back. Rolling her eyes in exacerbation, she broke free from his touch and went to sit next to Harry. Parvati joined them, and to Hermione's annoyance, Lavender plopped down next to Ron and refused to budge. The fucking bin battered her ridiculous eyelashes at him, who thrived on the attention he was receiving. Parvati leaned closer to Ginny and Hermione and whispered, "He looks so dangerously sexy, doesn't he?" Ginny nodded her approval at once and grinned. "I thought you had a thing for Blaze. I asked him to stop by our table later," Hermione excitedly told Parvati. Parvati blushed. "Thanks, but I was talking about Malfoy right now." Hermione turned to look at him. Astoria was firmly by his side, trying to shamelessly assert herself into his life. He couldn't shake his strong masculine smell from earlier. It felt like his glorious smell had taken up permanent residency inside her nose. Flooded her senses, overpowering each one. He wasn't overly pleased with her defiant reaction to it. Once everyone settled in, McGonagall briefly spoke about unity and a way forward without prejudice. She kindly thanked the committee for organizing a great event. The band started their first song. The prefects had already moved towards the dance floor, and Hermione's heart began to flutter as Malfoy approached her. He buttoned his jacket, slicked back his hair, and grinned. "Oh, Merlin, here we go," she thought. Pushing back her chair at once, Hermione got up, rushed over, and met him halfway before he reached their table. The last thing she wanted was to diffuse a confrontation between the head boy and her jealous boyfriend. Ron's eyes narrowed to mere slits. Carefully watched Malfoy lead Hermione onto the dance floor, twirling her once before they reached the middle. Draco took her hand nervously and screamed at his inner thoughts. "Get a grip, you idiot! She's just another bloody girl!" But no, she was anything but another girl. Tenderly placing one hand on her waist, Draco pulled Hermione closer to his body, and she let out an involuntary whimper. His smell was messing with her again. He entwined his fingers through her with the other, and she placed her free trembling hand on his shoulder. Draco sensed her tension and teased gently. "Relax, Granger. I don't bite," he rasped.
Unless you ask me to. Hermione swallowed hard. She needed a glass of water or anything to lubricate her dry throat. Merlin, he was standing so close. What the hell was wrong with her? That bloody, intoxicating smell. Damn it! She was too tempting. Putting caution to the wind, he moved his hand to the small of her back. His fingertips danced across her bare skin. The intimate gesture sent tiny shockwaves throughout her already trembling body, and another small whimper escaped her lips. Draco watched her intently. Her eyelashes were lowered, and in each other's arms they moved in rhythm to the music. He bent down slowly to whisper in her ear. "You look beautiful." He tried his best to rectify his earlier mistake. His lips barely grazed her earlobe, and Hermione's knees almost gave out. Twirling once again, he pulled her up against his body, and again she leaned in willingly. Merlin and all the gods above, she was lost. Her body was betraying her mercilessly. She felt her hand move from his shoulder to go around his neck. Draco tensed at her touch on the back of his neck. Her fingers lightly touched his hair and caressed it gently. Hermione looked into his eyes, refusing to back down. He stared back, mesmerized and confused. She could have sworn he almost bent to kiss her, but the song ended, and Astoria made her presence known. "Let him go, mudblood!" Hermione stepped back reluctantly, glared at the Slytherin girl, and warned menacingly. "I am the head girl, and if you dare me call that again, you will find yourself in big trouble." She was about to step away in anger when Draco grasped her wrist and pulled her back. He boldly raised her hand to his lips and gently kissed her knuckles. Astoria stared at him in disbelief and humiliation. How dare they embarrass her? The filthy mudblood would pay dearly. Hermione backed away slowly from the dance floor. She bumped into a couple and apologized. Rubbing her hand and the area where Draco's lips touched, she sat down and stared at her heated flesh. She swallowed hard. The sensation of the lips on her body, no matter how brief or small, had awakened something dangerous in her. Her and Ginny sat down next to her, laughing and giving each other quick pecks of affection. Ron was nowhere to be found, and thankfully no one noticed what happened on the dance floor, except a whimsical and very observant Luna. Quirky blonde eyed her through long eyelashes and smiled. Still rubbing her knuckles, Hermione looked up and met Luna's curious yet knowing gaze. The intelligent Ravenclaw smiled. Ron appeared out of nowhere. The stench had steadily increased. He put his arms around Hermione and dragged her to the dance floor. Hours went by, and despite their distance, Hermione felt her gaze drift to where Draco was. Hands in his pocket, he locked eyes with her and ran his hand through his fine hair. Everyone was having a great time, and she felt incredibly light-headed. It was bloody strange, she thought, swaying dangerously. She had not drunk anything except pumpkin juice and butterbeer. She was sure of it. What the hell was going on? After another inspection of the hall, Ron joined Hermione by the buffet table and asked desperately, "Are you okay, darling? You want to get out of here?" He had been coming on strong throughout the night, and she was exhausted by trying to keep him in his place. She was getting really tired of him pressuring her all the time. "No, Ron, I cannot leave. McGonagall will have my head," she told him firmly for the millionth time. He let out a frustrated groan and stormed off, leaving her to her thoughts. Ron had been livid at the dance she shared with Headboy, and no matter how much she tried to explain that it was McGonagall's idea, he was convinced Malfoy wanted to bed her. Ginny and Harry joined her and looked over her in concern. "Hermione, I think you need to call it a night." Brushing them off, she got to her feet and replied, "No, really, I'm fine." What she needed was some fresh air. The air inside the hall was suffocating.
She almost stumbled out of the entrance, descended the stairs, and took a deep breath. The fresh air felt amazing against her skin. It filled her lungs, but went straight to her head. Draco's eyes followed the departing head girl. Astoria was beginning to piss the living daylights out of him, being onto him like a protective girlfriend. Blaze tried to calm the situation by asking the clean girl to dance, and Theo was deep in conversation with Lovegood. He had been completely off in his assumption that Hermione liked Blaze. Apparently it was the Patil girl who had a crush on him. He sighed in relief, much to his annoyance. Why did he care who Granger liked? However, he knew he would have kissed her on the dance floor if Astoria had not interrupted them. The small revelation frightened him. He wouldn't give in to temptation. Having a soft spot for Hermione Granger would lead to disaster. Draco followed Hermione's movements for most of the night. He was genuinely concerned for her safety, and it didn't seem like her boyfriend cared very much. Stalker much, Malfoy? Why was she heading outside? It was chilly, and she was hardly dressed to the weather. Putting caution to the wind, he followed her and found her moments later with a stupid bloody grin on her face without hesitation. She swayed to imaginary music, and Draco momentarily wondered if she was under some bizarre spell. Granger, what the fuck are you doing outside? It's freezing. He scolded, irritated that she was outside without a jacket. He quickly slipped his off and draped it around her slender shoulders. Blurry-eyed, she turned to face him and grinned snobbily. Salazar, she was drunk and clearly hallucinating. Hey, Malfoy, the stars look so pretty. Don't they? But not as pretty as you. He giggled and touched the tip of his nose with her forefinger. Stepping closer, he bundled her in his jacket and hissed, Come on, let's get you back inside. I don't want to be held responsible for you dying of hypothermia. She cupped his face and felt himself lean into her touch. You're so funny, Malfoy. With that, her eyes rolled back into her head, and she passed out. Caught her easily before she hit the ground and frowned. Oh, fuck this. He picked her up bridal style, walked up the steps, and almost collided with the concerned Potter and Weaslette. Oh shit, what happened? The red-haired girl asked in concern. Well, fuck if I know. She was probably wasted. I guess she's passed out. Draco replied, not bothering to hide his annoyance that they had let her drink too much. Harry eyed him suspiciously, and Draco shot back, Wipe that look off your face, Potter. It's a good thing I was there to catch her. I didn't like it one bit. His voice strained, and he asked through clenched teeth, Are you going to take her back to the dorm? No, I'm taking her back to the party, Draco replied sarcastically. He then threw Harry a stern look. Of course I'm taking our shit-faced head girl to the dorm. If McGonagall sees her like this, I will get my ass handed to me. Crelled Hermione closer to his body, straightened and hissed. So please get the fuck out of my way. Granger stepped aside reluctantly and watched Malfoy carry Hermione back to their dorm as quickly as possible. Outside the door, Draco recited a password impatiently and kicked the door in. Fuck! How did he get himself into this bloody situation? He had no idea what her password was and debated internally about leaving her on the common room couch. Looking down at the girl in his arms with a faint smile on her face made him smile as well. She looked so peaceful and beautiful. Her so-called boyfriend was a cheating, horny, fucking prat. A funny feeling settled in his stomach. Was he feeling sorry for Granger? The texture repulsed him, but it lingered against his wishes. Draco fought the urge to steal a kiss. She looked that fucking delectable, but never, not like this, and not without her consent. Fuck it. Against his better judgment, he took her to his room and laid her down on the silk bedding. Waving his wand over her, he transfigured her clothes into something more comfortable. Quickly changed into his boxers and looked over her one last time before sliding between the sheets. An arm under his head, he thought back to the night's events, and before he knew it, he felt his eyelids droop and close. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of Always Mine by SamadiW. If you'd like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.